Did you know that how you price your product truly can make or break your company? And that's what we're going to be geeking out all about today, which is we're going to be talking all about how to implement usage-based pricing to help your startup optimize for revenue and profit. And so without further ado, let's dive on right in. Hi, everyone. My name is Shuo Chen. I am a former founder, now investing in founders and teaching founders at Berkeley and Stanford. In my investing career, I've had the fortune of working with now over 100 venture-backed startups, dozens of them who have had successful exits, whether it's in the form of IPOs, acquisitions by Fortune 100 companies, or now are massive unicorns. And I've really had the opportunity to not only invest in them, work with them, but also learn from the front lines what's working and what's not working. And I want to share some of the lessons that I've learned from these experiences. And of course, I'm also a board member here at Decode, the largest founder community co-hosted between Berkeley and Stanford. And I want to share with you some of the top lessons I've learned, not just in an investing, but also in a teaching capacity. So without further ado, let's get on right into our topic today, which is how to implement usage-based pricing. Today, I want to cover the top 3 tactics that would help you implement usage-based pricing, but just a very quick message right before we dive into the content, and that is that the Decode annual conference is back. We have some incredible speakers confirmed for this year, ranging from Barry Eggers, who is one of the 4 co-founders of Lightspeed Ventures. For anyone who's in the startup world, you'll know the name Lightspeed very well, or from speakers such as David Jen, who is a dear friend of mine. He's a CFO at Google X. If you want to have an opportunity to learn from some of these industry thought leaders across from founders to investors to operators, and not only just meet them, but actually get to know them in an intimate roundtable setting, definitely check out the Decode annual conference. We'll hyperlink more information below. There's an opportunity to join invite-only lunches and dinners with them as well and demo your product to investors and operators and potential advisors of yours. So definitely check that out below. We do cover a lot of the lessons learned for especially the earliest stages of founders at this conference, just like you've heard from the past series of videos. So check that out. But as promised, very quick message reminder aside, I want to get back right into the content for today, which is, again, 3 tactics to implement usage-based pricing. So first tactic for today is to provide pricing options that enable for flexibility. So typically when you're looking at usage, whether it's software usage or for AI usage, how your customers might use your product varies. And one might be using your product all the time. Another customer might have peak-based pricing, for example, where they use a lot at one time but don't really use a lot of it otherwise. So depending on your customer behaviors, you want to make sure that you adjust for your pricing plan. You want to account for people who barely use it versus others who 10x the volume overnight. And so you definitely don't want to implement a one-size-fits-all kind of pricing model because that just doesn't work for the different types of customers you're trying to serve. Even if all of your customers fall into the exact same niche and if you've watched previous videos, you'll know that we always advocate for very precise customer targeting. But even if your targeting is very precise, it doesn't mean all of their usage is the same. So that's why you want to make sure to offer a pricing model that lets your customers choose between stability or flexibility. What do we mean by that? Well, you want to package any sort of features that you have if you're optimizing for stability into fixed price bundles that align with how customers might buy the product today. But then you might want to have a layered in usage tier or credit system of some sort that allow more advanced customers to then graduate into a more flexible pricing structure. So that way customers have the stability of knowing exactly how much they're signing up to pay you for, but at the same time, they also have a certain level of flexibility to say, hey, as I use this product of yours, I'll have a better sense of how I actually interact with it day to day. So you want to let fixed price packages coexist with this usage model so that customers can choose between what works best for them, whether it's stability or flexibility. Now, this might seem a little obvious because a lot of the models out there, especially in terms of very popular software like ChatGPT, seem to offer something like this, where maybe there's a base price and then there's a token-based pricing where then it's usage-based. But in an enterprise setting, it's actually really hard to build a right system for this. And that's what leads us into our second tactic for today. And that is, in order to really implement a usage-based pricing model well, you need to build build a pricing hypothesis. So this is where you want to start by auditing internal data. You want to understand, what are sales reps discounting the most? What features get the most traction among your customers? And are there any patterns in usage or just clusters of behavior that help you understand based off all the internal data that you already have? And after you've analyzed this internal data that you have access to, then you want to perform a little bit more competitive research. You want to understand your buyer psychology and how to adjust your pricing mechanisms to match that. For example, what are the top features that your competitor products might highlight? Because the kind of products they highlight are probably the most attractive features. How are other features packaged, or how are they priced? What positioning are they using for usage-based options? And after you do this competitive analysis, you'll have a document or a spreadsheet, depending on how you track, with rows and columns just listing out who all your competitors are and what are some of the biggest pricing characteristics they have. So then now you have your internal data, you have this external research based on competitors. You can then start to rank areas of perceived value from your customers. Not where you ask them, like, what would you pay for this product? But what matters most to you? So you want to ask questions like, what features are most essential? What needs further investment or improvement? Why did this particular customer buy your product? So that way you have a better understanding of the areas where the customer has the most perceived value. And based on these 3 pieces of input, then you can start to draft together this pricing hypothesis of yours. And you never want to stick to just one hypothesis. You want to have at least 2 to 3 different pricing hypotheses to help you understand which one is the most likely one. So you want to consider how the current package is performing, what your competitive market looks like. What do your customers value the most? And that's really based off of, again, all the top 3 inputs that we were looking at earlier, which is analyzing internal data, performing external research on competitors and their pricing plans, and ranking areas perceived value. So you take all of this into consideration and figure out, well, where is there potential misalignment? Is there any sort of misalignment between how I'm currently packaging my product and the usage of this product? For example, are you overselling or underselling certain tiers? Are you underpricing or overpricing certain features, especially around premium features where your customers are using it a lot? Competitors are perhaps not paying as much attention, and it's the area with the most perceived value from your customer, then perhaps this is an ideal area where you can potentially increase the pricing so that you can really maximize for revenue and bottom line there. So this is where you want to look at all of the perceived patterns from all the 3 input sources and start to draft your pricing hypotheses. And of course, once you have a couple of pricing hypotheses to test, then you want to mock up pricing pages to show things like very clear tiering of pricing systems or just modules of how your customers can combine and do different combinations of the different features you offer. Sometimes it's just as simple as tiering, but sometimes it's modules, depending on how your product is structured. You want to also showcase on this pricing page a value metric. Even if you're not charging on it yet, you want to showcase how much value you're providing so you can show some proof points. You want to also show on this pricing page things like price points that just align better with your customer's perceived value. And you want to mock up these pricing pages based on your pricing hypotheses so that you can test which pricing page is getting the highest conversion for what kind of client. And based on that, you then have success metrics to help you figure out, is this working? How do I know the right signals if this is working? Now, if you follow a product-led growth model, it means that your product is attracting other users. Then you need to have a couple of these different iterations of the website, different pricing pages that show, and just see which one converts paying customers better. Does it upsell well? Does it convert customers well? So that could be a potential success metric. But if you have a sales-led motion, then you can assess this in other ways based on conversations with customers to figure out, are you pricing this the right way? And that actually leads us into our 3rd tactic for today, which is based on all of this information. You want to validate your pricing hypothesis. So remember in the last tactic, we were just talking about building a pricing hypothesis. Well, in fact, we specifically asked you to build a few different pricing hypotheses. Now, in this last tactic, we want you to validate the best pricing hypotheses that you've identified. So this is where you are actively testing and trying to validate. So in testing, you're testing for reactions through just very lightweight and practical methods. There's a couple of top methods, like you could do this in a sales pilot, you could do this via customer interviews, you could do this by running sort of analysis online using AI tools or just Google searches. You could do this in some sort of a internal modeling or role play model. And I'll explain what each of these mean. So if you're just testing for your pricing hypotheses, you're trying to get reactions. And in a sales pilot, you can use mock pricing pages in live calls and just watch where your sales prospects push back or they hesitate. And that helps you get a good sense of how this works. And it's not just the mock pricing page, it's also the actual pilot itself. As you're talking about the sales pilot to get in place, you want to figure out what are the patterns you're seeing where customers are super willing to pay. In fact, the reaction you're getting is that even if you price this product higher, they would be willing to pay more, versus what are the features that they're really, really pushing back on. So that's what I mean by sales pilot. By customer interviews, this is a little bit more self-explanatory, but you want to ask your customers, which pricing options best reflect the actual value that your product delivered for them, not just what they'd be willing to pay. You want to really ask this question in a tailored way, which is, hey, out of the pricing options that we have on this page here, which one best reflects the value that we deliver for you? The third way to test for your customer reactions is, of course, doing online research. You can summarize qualitative feedback from across different teams to try to identify consistent themes and just do online research to see what kind of reviews are out there that people are putting out for your competitors and for your own product. And then eventually you can input all of this into an LLM if you want so that it can do further analysis for you. But the last way to test reaction is you can do some sort of internal training module or role play where you can just play this out within the team. You can pressure test the messaging among your team members. These are obviously people who are on your side, who are going to try to figure out the best messaging with you. And if you can't even articulate it or clearly explain it to your own internal team members, then of course your customers are not going to understand the actual value delivered. So this is where you're really going to be going through and testing reactions to each of the pricing hypotheses just to see what people's initial reactions would be like. You would, of course, ask this in a non-binding way, so you're not saying this is what we're offering you, but hey, between this and this option, which one, again, seems like it would be the best fit for you? So again, testing reactions, you can do this through sales pilots, customer comment, of course, customer live conversations there, or targeted customer interviews, online research that could lead into, doing things like analysis with AI tools, or even internal role playing and just modeling this out to see what works. And of course, based on all the data that you're collecting, you'll eventually gravitate towards one specific pricing hypothesis that best reflect all of the feedback you're getting. And based on all of this feedback, you want to start to really adjust. You want to adjust based on the product, the price point, the number of existing customers. There's really not one single universal strategy that is best fit for all. So there's a lot of testing to be done in this process here. But hopefully we've at least shared with you some very practical and specific tactics for how you can design the right system to implement a usage-based system. And this is, of course, all for you to price your product in the best way so you can optimize for not just top line revenue and sales, but also for bottom line profit. And ultimately, it is the revenue and the profit that your startup makes that ultimately make or break your company. So this is an absolutely important tactic to start implementing in your day-to-day session, really as a founder. And I forgot to mention that there are also traps and traps to avoid and tools that you can leverage in this process. If you want to learn more about the traps to avoid in implementing this in your day-to-day life as a founder, or you want to figure out what are tools that I can leverage to help me do this faster, check out our hyperlink below. You can read our full newsletter to know more about the details there. And of course, if you have any other follow-up questions based on today's session, please feel free to leave it in the comments below or reach out to me or to our team via LinkedIn or via email. We would love to cover your follow-up question in a future week. And of course, if you found this video helpful, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. And of course, share this video with any other founder friends of yours. Thank you so much for tuning in. And hopefully this has been helpful to give you a few more ideas for how to think about implementing usage-based pricing for your product, help your startup maximize for revenue and profit. And we look forward to seeing you in a future week. Thanks so much for tuning in. Take care. Bye.